Welcome to this episode of the Impactathon Show. Today, we're lucky to have Cate Johnson. So, Cate, if you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll get to go back and forth and ask each other questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Neetal. I'm so happy to be here with you in spirit. My name is Cate Johnson, and I'm the founder and CEO of ArborRevolutions, which is a nature-centered design company. I'm based right now in Boulder, Colorado, so at the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. And I'm joined today at my feet with my little pup, Luna.
So I've known Cate for a couple of years, and it's great. We really have connected on this idea of building ecosystems, of taking big risks to pursue our passions and our interest in social impact. And Cate was a recent impact catalyst and also led a workshop at one of the repitch events at Impactathon. Cate, you want to talk about, do you have anything you want to share about your experience at Impactathon and kind of you've been involved in a few different ways, so kind of your lens.
I love the Impactathon process. I have an MBA, and one of my highlights of my MBA experience was participating in a case competition. And so there are many similar themes of working with teams and trying to find solutions. And so I'm kind of nostalgic about the process personally. And so I think it's been a real blessing of having to do everything virtually in the past year, that it actually offered me an opportunity to participate in multiple Impactathons and the repitch. And so it was really an easy yes when you approached me and said, do you want to be part of this? Because it aligns to so many of my values and so many of the things that I'm trying to support and build in my work, which is rapid iteration, just trying new things and using connection and creativity as really the fire that drives you. And to me, like last is there's to me never a bad time to grow your community. So I remember the last time I was an impact catalyst, I was paired coaching a social entrepreneur, and it turns out that he was doing work in a part of the world that I had done work, and we were able to share some just personal experiences somewhere. And it just was a reminder of how we have so many connections to people. You just dig for a couple minutes, you usually can find so many really cool overlaps with someone. Like, how would I know that a high school student in Alberta, Canada, and I would have so much in common? It's just, to me, a lovely reminder of hope, of kind of the next generation of ideas and how we can collaborate. And I'm just really excited to see how it grows and continues. So, yeah. I'm super curious, because you have moved to this hybrid model or this virtual model. What right now is missing in social enterprise that we might be able to meet in this virtual environment differently than we could by flying people to one place or meeting people where they were in location?
That's a great question. I think in some ways, when we are using the same technologies and ways of connecting, it can be a great equalizer, a democratization in one way. So that's in one way, if you're able to get online, now you have a seat at the table. You can join a meeting. You can, join one of the very many ways to join now with Clubhouse that's audio only. So that maybe even opens it up further. So I think that helps for true collaboration. The only challenge is time zones, but that's something that even with technology, we have not been able to solve for. So, but it makes true collaboration because everyone is virtual first. And I think there's something, we've seen that now in the last couple, that's been really amazing. The challenge, and this is something where it's a call for every social entrepreneur, is that this also locks out a huge percentage of the population of the world that is not online, or that these technologies are not accessible for one reason or another. So in some ways, we're now shutting out people that maybe could have participated if it had been a live event. So I think with everything, there are the cost benefits and, and positives and negatives. But yeah, those are some of the things that I think, yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
What is your personal philosophy on taking leaps of faith to become more aligned with the things you want to do?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. Leaps of faith. I mean, I would describe my life today in that category, from where I live to the dog that I adopted to the work that I'm doing. to being being in therapy and being a recipient of coaching, all of that are leaps of faith in a way. To me, and this is where a lot of the nature-centered design work comes in and really came out, was birthed from, was this idea of nature wants us to succeed. If we're here, if we are so privileged and lucky to be alive in the world right now, with all of the reasons that we could not be alive, from forest fires to pandemics to you name it, there's a bias for us to succeed. And what we see in nature is that abundance is the default. Scarcity is not the default. And so by turning outward and connecting to what nature is teaching me and what I can see that is supporting growth and supporting life around me, it becomes less of faith and more of it just feels like the flow is in that direction. And so, for example, one of the reasons why I live where I live here in Boulder, Colorado, which is the indigenous land of the 𝘳𝘦𝘨𝘪𝘴𝘵𝘦𝘥, Cheyenne, and Arapaho people, is because I was doing some work up in Canada in the Rockies and had just an incredible experience recognizing the energy of the mountains, which are so stable and so grounding and so calm. And I recognized that that was the energy that was calling me. And so some people would call it a leap of faith that I went with that hunch, that I went with that intuition. For me, it was just tapping into what was already here and then believing in myself and believing that the world would rally around me. Yeah, that's the best way I can describe it.
I love that. I love that.
I'm curious, speaking of nature and making life decisions based on nature. I'm always curious because nature has played a part in my life through my whole life. I tell people, my playground was always the forest. All my memories as a kid are getting muddy. And even as an adult, it's the best part of my days. What is your earliest memory in nature? Do you have something that as a child or teenager, it's like really sticky in your memory?
Yeah, that's a great question. I also feel very connected to being outdoors and, around trees and water. And I remember when I moved around a lot growing up. So I remember when I was maybe in 2nd through 4th grade, we were in upstate New York. And we lived near this creek, and there was like a little, someone had built like a little playhouse there for the kids. And we would just go there, and I remember catching frogs. Like I was just so interested in in sitting under the trees, and it just felt like we would just go out for hours and just be like, tinkering around, playing in the creek, and kind of using our imagination to create these worlds. And I remember I even wrote about it in an essay, I think in 7th grade later on, recalling that time. So yeah, it's a really special. It's so funny how you can, just by talking about it, I'm in my mind kind of going back to that place, which is very exciting. So.
Yeah. And I love that. Like, I feel like I got to time travel with you there. Like I could imagine like what that would be like to be there. And the words that are coming up for me were just like oasis, and I always laugh when I like open the Calm app, or I'm like trying to meditate, or when I was at South by Southwest and they had like a little booth for Calm, and they had a literal sloth in their booth in the middle of the convention center. And it's like, sometimes we make it so difficult, or we like make it seem so inaccessible. Like you have to download this app, or you have to like do this thing, or you have to sign up for this thing. And it's just like go outside and find a tree and like look at it. Like it can be that simple as like a child just like being curious and looking at the stars. And like it's similar to what you said of like, how can we democratize this and not make nature this privileged experience? It doesn't have to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. So my last question for you is, you've touched a little bit on what nature-centered design is, but is there a way that you could imagine social entrepreneurs could incorporate this framework into, as they build from the ground up their ideas?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. So nature-centered design, just very simply, is a solution finding cycle that is modeled after evolution. And so we start with a question, and we start with just learning about what you're curious about. And we use nature as an example of expanding who we can empathize with, expanding who we can learn from. And so for me, social entrepreneurism and social enterprise is working either outside of existing systems or connecting disconnected systems. That's generally how I think about it. And so nature has so many examples of how to form connections with different species. You just look at a forest, for example. One lens is like, okay, there's the trees and there's the animals and there's this. When you look more closely, it's all so intertwined. And it's really about tapping into the wisdom and really the solutions that are already present around us and reframing them in new ways. And so one of my favorite sayings is, everything in the forest is the forest. I always think like every business can be a social enterprise. And so it's how you decide to frame and create intention around how you're going to solve problems, who you're going to solve problems for, and then what your solutions actually look like. And so to me, nature has so many examples of how we can communicate, how we can share resources, how we can look at resiliency and birth and death in new ways without putting a label of this is good or this is bad. But again, it just helps expand how we can think about our connections and our community. And again, like just kind of realizing that we're all in it together, just like the forest.
Well, you can find ArborRevolutions, which is the organization company that Cate has founded, does workshops on nature-centered design. And we hope that we're happy to have you in the Impactathon community, and it'll be exciting to see what other things we can, do together going forward. So thanks so much, Cate.
Thank you so much for having a couple minutes to chat.